Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have a video covering the panel, What's Up with Penguin Books? That was at DragonCon in 2024. I normally would try to get this video out immediately after DragonCon. However, I got sick right after DragonCon, and so I wasn't able to really record videos for a while. And so this is going out a little bit later than normal. So I got what we call the con crud, which is when you get a little bit sick after going to a big convention with a lot of other people there, which, it happens usually. But I wanted to cover this panel specifically. This was the one specific panel that I wanted to do a dedicated video on. If you've followed some of my LibertyCon footage, I did dedicated panels for dedicated videos for the publishing panels that I attended. I went to the Chris Kennedy publishing panel. I went to the Three Ravens publishing panel. I went to the Raconteur Press publishing panel and to the Bain Traveling Roadshow. And so I made a general vlog talking about all the stuff I saw at LibertyCon, but I made a dedicated video for the publishing panels. And I decided to do the same thing with DragonCon. I also got to see the Bain Traveling Roadshow again at DragonCon, but because I had just covered most of the Bain titles in the LibertyCon video, and also I had just there wasn't a lot of new stuff. There were like maybe about a half dozen new stuff to the audience, like 3 or 4 announcements really, not even that much. So I decided, you know what, I'm just not gonna do a dedicated video for the Bain Traveling Roadshow this year. But this is the first time I'd ever been to the What's Up with Penguin publishing panel, and so which really, first of all, I have to say, it should have been renamed What's Up with Ace Books, because it was an Ace Books publishing panel, specific division of Penguin. And so Penguin, I think Ace was the only imprint from Penguin that was actually present at DragonCon, which I've been trying to get some of the other imprints to come down. You know who you are, because I've been trying to get you to come down. You should. But Ace was down there. They had, big booths. They had a lot of their editors and their authors there. And they did this big panel that was in a really big room. And this was a sold-out panel. There was standing room only. I was impressed by how many people were there. Now, most of the people there, let's be honest, they were there for 2 people. They were there for Jim Butcher and for Matt Dinneman of Jim Butcher for the Dresden Files and the Aeronauts Windlass and the Codex Solera, and then they were also there for Matt Dinneman, author of Dungeon Crawler Carl. But there were other authors there as well. They had Kim Harrison, who apparently is a very prolific writer for Ace Books, and then they also had James J. Butcher, the son of Jim Butcher. He was there. And then they also had Jack Campbell, who is a science fiction fantasy writer for Ace. And so they had those authors were all present. And then they had 2 editors from the publisher. They had Ann Sowards and they had Jessica Wade. And Ann Sowards, not only did I know the name, but I'd actually gotten to listen to Ann Sowards on a publishing panel earlier that day, the day that this happened. And so I got to hear her talk anyway about her job in the publishing industry and stuff like that. She brings an interesting perspective because of all the editors that were at DragonCon, she's the most traditional in the terms of the way she got into the job, the way that the type of publisher she works at now, things like that. And so she was there along with Jessica Wade, and the 2 editors ran the panel. And I'm going to talk about some pros, I'm going to talk about some cons, and I'm going to talk about all the books that were discussed. But to talk about the first pro I want to talk about is it was an incredibly well-oiled machine, the way that Ace ran this panel. I was so impressed. They had the authors up on the stage. They had the big projector that had all the pictures. It was all very smooth. The microphones were turned way up so everyone could hear. It was a very, very smooth process. And they ran things well. So first of all, they talked about 35 books during the course of the panel, and they only spent about a minute on each book unless the author was present for the book, and then they spent about another 45 seconds to another minute asking the author a question, and the author answered the question. So they were very fast and efficient in getting us, and we understood what the books were about, and we were able to take pictures and stuff, but it was very efficient. But for every single book that was talked about, either they had a copy of the book there, or they had another book by that author that they gave away. And so there were 35 books that they had a stack of on the table, and everybody who got in the room, which there were probably about, I'd say probably about 300, 400 of us in the room. So there was, there was a decent number of us in the room, but yeah, I'd say probably about close to 400. And so you had about a 1 in 10 chance of getting your name drawn in the raffle. But the way they did it was everybody had a little raffle ticket, and then when your name was, when they would read the book out and announce it, and they would discuss it for about 30 seconds or a minute, and then they'd pull out the raffle ticket, they'd say your number, and then you'd raise your hand if you had that, and they had someone run the book to you. And so that's how they handed out the books. So it's a very efficient process. Now, Bain does another process that I also like, where Bain puts a bunch of books at the front, and then they say, if this is your first time, come get a book, or they say if it's if you're an educator or a veteran, and I like that process as well. So it's two very different processes that I like, but I did like the efficiency at the ACE panel. And then also I really liked that the audience was very professional. They were very quiet. They were clapping. They were excited, but we were able to very much pay attention to everything that happened. And so I've been talking about some of the good things about the panel. I'm just going to go ahead and get something out of the way before I even talk about the books. I do not like any of the covers for the books here. There's a few that I like, but really, most of them, no. I really don't like. That's for a couple of reasons. One is this is a very much a publishing group that is very much geared towards women in their audiences. You can tell that not just by the types of books that they're publishing, but the fact that the high majority, I think out of the 35 books, I think 30 of them that they talked about were all written by women. And so the majority of these books are written by women. The audience is clearly for women. The cover design, therefore, reflects that. And so they're very much, and I know some women who don't like the type of modern cover design. If you kind of will know what I'm referring to, that kind of romance/romantasy cover art that we're seeing in traditional publishing, and this is unfortunately a very specific example of it. And so none of the covers really grabbed me particularly, except for a few that I was already interested in. And also, anytime they did a reprint of something, you just look at it compared to the old one. Oh, the old one was so much better, and I wish Ace would learn that, and they just haven't. I would really like to have a discussion about that with them, because I think it would be very enlightening. But anyway, so the cover art, didn't really love the design of it. But still, it was interesting to learn about some of the books that they have. And so my plan next is to just rapid fire go through and list the name of the book, give you the name of the author, and then also tell you if it's out or when it's coming out. And so we're going to just go through that. And then if the author was there, or if I was able to get extra information, I was trying to write stuff down as quick as I could. If I have extra information, I'll try to include that here. But let's go ahead and start with the first book they talked about was Three Kinds of Lucky by Kim Harrison. That book is already out today, so you can get that book today. They also talked about two books by Jack Campbell. They talked about In Our Stars, which is already out, and then they had Destiny's Way, which is coming out in February of 2025. And these look like cool sci-fi books, but I didn't like the covers for them. They also talked about the new Patricia Briggs book titled Winter Lost, which Patricia Briggs is usually at DragonCon. This year she wasn't able to make it, but usually she's there. And so her book is out now. It's part of her big series. They also had a trilogy by Kim Harrison. I told you, Kim Harrison is very prolific at ACE. And she wrote an ebook trilogy titled, the first book, First Contact, the second book, Totality, the third book, Emergence. And so those books, they actually gave out ebook codes to people. And why would you do if it's a full novel, why would you do ebook only? I'm such a print book person that it's if you want me to be able to read your book, you better have print copies available, because that's the only way I really read. So it's if you don't have print copies available, do I consider it a book? Anyway, just food for thought. They also had, now this cover I liked. They had The Night Ends With Fire by KX Song. I really liked this cover. I thought looks gorgeous. This is not my style personally, but I think that this looks like an epic cover. And it apparently was inspired by Mulan, this book. They also had The Love of My Afterlife by Christy Greenwood, and when they pitched this book, I thought it was hilarious. So that book seems a little bit funny. They also talked about Dungeon Crawler Carl, the new RPG series that's really popular. Ace has now picked up the series for publishing, and I know that there's a big movie deal and TV stuff going on, but you look at the new covers for Dungeon Crawler Carl compared to the old covers, the self-published covers were better. Anyway, let's move on. And by the way, Matt Dinneman, who was there, said that he has finished book 7 and that he currently has plans to make it a 10-book series, but he could go longer. But he currently has plans to make it a 10-book series. We also had the book discussed, We Love the Nightlife by Rachel Caller Croft, which is also out now. They also talked about The Olympian Affair by Jim Butcher, which is the second book in his Aeronauts Windless series, and he was there talking, and I actually got to get a picture with him at a book signing later on, and he signed my books, which was really nice of him. But at the panel, he said that he was about 3 to 4 weeks away from turning in the next Dresden Files book, and then after he turned that in, he was going to turn his attention to the third Aeronauts Windless book. The third book in this series that he's currently in the middle of. So that's pretty exciting. I hadn't known that information yet. We also, they talked about An Academy for Liars by Alexis Henderson, which is out in September 2024. So out pretty soon. They also talked about Rewitched by Lucy Jane Wood, out September 2024. The Haunting of Moscow House, which looks like a cool horror book, with maybe a little bit of thriller vibes to it, by, I don't know how to pronounce this, Alicia Sanikova Gilmore, which is out September 2024. They talked about So Thirsty by Rachel Harrison, also out September 2024. I told you she's very prolific there. They also talked about The Village Library Demon Hunting Society by C.M. Wagoner, out September 2024. This one, just the title alone made it sound fun, and then I heard the pitch for it at the panel, and I was like, that's a pretty cool pitch. So that one actually did pique my interest. They also had My Vampire Plus One by Jenna Levine, which is out September 2024, and this is the most egregious use of that kind of romance cover art that is like popular in romance books now. Couldn't stand that. Anyway, they also talked about Bull Moon Rising by Ruby Dixon, which is out in October 2024. And if you've heard of the name Ruby Dixon before, that's the author of the book Ice Planet Barbarians. And if you look at the cover of Bull Moon Rising, yep. That's what you're getting in this book. They also talked about Demon's Bluff by Ruby Dixon, also out October 2024. They talked about A Grim Reaper's Guide to Catching a Killer by Maxi Dara, which is out in October 2024. This one, I liked the pitch for this one. They also talked about The Book of Witching by C.J. Cook, which is also out October 2024. They talked about This Cursed House by Del Sandine, which is also out October 2024. They talked about The Teller of Small Fortunes by Julie Leong, which is out November 2024. I actually didn't mind this cover. I thought this cover was okay. They also talked about Toto by A.J. Hackworth, which is out November 24. And this cover is funny. It's just funny. I thought it was clever. It's not a cover I like, but it's clever. I'll give it that. They also talked about Bride of the Shadow King by Sylvia Mercedes, which is out November 2024. Mother of Rome by Lauren J.A. Bear, out January 2025. And this one piqued my interest because it is basically, this tale of Romulus and Remus in old Rome. Well, what happened to their mother? And so it's supposed to be this feminist, retelling of the creation of Rome from the mother's perspective. And I'm like, Don't love everything about that pitch, but it's interesting from a historian perspective, from a history teacher. I'm curious to see what direction Lauren Bear takes the story. So that's out January 2025. They also are reprinting some Anne Bishop books, Anne Bishop's written a lot of fantasy-type books before. Daughter of Blood, Heir of Shadows, and Queen of Darkness. And these covers are so bad. I didn't even love the original covers. For these books, you compare the original covers to these new covers. I didn't even love those. But they look spectacular comparatively. I don't know what's up, Ace. Why? Anyway, they also talked about The Rainfall Market by Yu Young Guang, I hope I pronounced that right, which is out January 2025. Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. I was shocked that Grady Hendrix was published by Ace. That surprised me. So I saw that name on there and I was like, oh, that's surprising. Actually, that looks like very much a Grady Hendrix cover. So I'm curious to see how that book turns out. And then the last book that was talked about was Cold Iron Task by James J. Butcher, which is the third book in his Unorthodox Chronicles, which is out in March 2025. And I actually, just after DragonCon, was at a used bookstore, and I found a copy of the first book, Dead Man's Hand, from his series, which also has the same cover artist. If you're like, man, that looks a lot like the cover art for his father's series, The Dresden Files, it's because it's the same cover artist. But I picked up Dead Man's Hand, and so I plan to read this series, and the third book comes out in March, which is really interesting. I don't know if it's a trilogy or an ongoing series. I'd guess an ongoing series if he's, following in his father's footsteps. But that was the last book that they talked about. And then after the panel, they had a time to do Q&A, which was a fun time, and I think a good time because Rachel Harrison got some questions, Jim Butcher got some questions, James J. Butcher got some questions, Jack Campbell got some questions, and Matt Dinneman got questions. So everybody got questions, which was really nice. And the editors, I think, did a very good job. They kind of went back and forth depending on... They basically said it wasn't like one editor for half the time and one editor for half the time. It was basically when they got to a book that that editor had edited, they talked about it. And then when it was the other person, they just handed it over and let the other person talk. So I thought this was a very well-produced panel. Again, I do not like the cover arts for most of these. I do like the James J. Butcher cover arts. Those ones were good. But most of these, I don't like the cover arts. But I appreciate Ace coming down to DragonCon, doing this panel, having a presence at DragonCon. They get points because the other publishers from Penguin didn't show up. So they get points for that. I will give them that. So that is my discussion on the panel. What's Up With Penguin books, or What's Up With Penguin Ace books. So which book of these that I talked about are you most interested in? And which books of these do you like the covers, or do you hate the covers like I do? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.